Good morning, everyone, and happy Friday the 13th. It's Friday, February 13th, and welcome to 7investing Live. This is our live stream event. We focus on new stock market opportunities and intriguing market topics every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. As I said, it is Friday the 13th. Depending on your perspective, you could also see it as a pre-Valentine's Day event. My name is Simon Erickson. I'm the founder and CEO of 7investing. We make stock market recommendations and best buys every single month. You can see all of those in our long-term investing process at 7investing.com, where your first 7 days are absolutely free. I am very excited about the show here today. We are bringing back a former 7investing advisor, Manisha Samy, who is, in my opinion, riding the wave of the biotech and healthcare industry. She's always at the forefront of innovation. She's been an analyst. She's been a venture capitalist. She's been a consultant and many, many different hats, really kind of an expert on what's going on in innovation in this space. Manisha, I know I speak on behalf of everyone when I say, welcome to 7investing Live here this morning.
It's great to be back, and thank you for having me, Simon. I'm really excited to jump in and talk more about biotech with you. That's always been my favorite. So excited to be here, and thank you for having me.
And we're excited to have you as well. And we've got to talk about AI on the show today. We are always talking about AI in some capacity. And I posted the other day, there's certain things that I want AI to be doing more in my life and some things I want it to do less of in my life, right? We spent a lot of time talking about the threats of AI. We've talked about AI replacing jobs and doing all these other things we're not excited about. Some of the things we're really excited about, though, is in scientific and medical discovery, though. And Manisha, I know that this is a space that you know very well, is how can you use AI to develop drugs more effectively and ultimately help patients and save lives? And that's going to be kind of the topic that we're going to discuss here in today's live stream. We are in a moment going to get into later in the program our stock of focus, which is Recursion Pharmaceuticals. But first, let's start at the 10,000 foot level, as I always like to do. Manisha, as you know better than I do, the pharmaceutical and biotech industry is very, very hard to compete in. It costs an average of $2.5 billion and up to 10 years of research to successfully commercialize a new drug. And of course, that's based on clinical trials. That's based on years of R&D effort and a lot of heavy fixed costs. It's just kind of a tough space to compete in and a tough space to invest in. Can you maybe unwrap that a little bit more? Tell us about why it is that biotech is so hard.
Yeah, there are just too many unknowns. One of the biggest factors, and I think from an investing point of view, and also from a company running a company point of view within biotech, is capital constraints. So you can have devoted 8 years, 7 years of your time focused on one asset. It's gone through preclinical trials, phase one, phase two. Now we're in phase three, and we're hoping that a drug will be FDA approved. And then all of a sudden, you get your data set back, and it's not as efficacious as we thought it would be. It's not clinically meaningful. And so you have those lost years and all those capital expenditures over the past 6, 7, 8 years. And that's where companies fail. And especially if you are a one or two kind of binary biotech company, that's a lot of risk that you're taking on. So even getting one FDA approved drug onto the market takes years of time. And there's a lot of capital, a lot of equity raising for public companies. So it's not the easiest. There are a lot of constraints. So, it's constrained by time and capital. And then the other is the probability of success. It's not just, okay, we found a target, now it's going to get approved, let's run the trials. Historically, if you're looking at what indication a drug is going after, if it's an oncology indication or a neurology indication, there's different probability of success, going from preclinical trials to, okay, let's go into in-human trials. So let's do phase one, now slightly larger cohort in the trial. So phase two, and we're checking for safety. And then phase three is really the one where, okay, is it safe and, is it effective in a large group of people? And then not only that, is it better than the standard of care? Because if it's not, then it's like, okay, well, it works, but we already have something that works better. So it still won't get approved. So with all of these things, biotech becomes very risky, and it's biology. We don't know what we don't know in science. So for a lot of times, especially in the beginning stages, it's a lot of hypothesis driven science, right? So we're scientists are saying, okay, this might work, and okay, this looks good in the clinic. Let's slowly kind of take this along. We're spending millions in, in each phase. And in preclinical, what people don't appreciate is that they go through tens of thousands of molecules, and we're talking about small molecules. We're not even talking about, kind of, CAR T therapy or cell therapy, which is a whole other beast. Even for small molecules, they go through tens of thousands of molecules before optimizing and choosing just one. So that's a lot of time spent.
It's fascinating how complex this is and how difficult, like we just mentioned, all the capital that's required for this, all the time that's required. It's almost like comparing the software industry to the biotech industry. Software is so easy to fail fast, right? You can go out there and create something and then iterate it and then launch a new software patch almost in a very short amount of time. I remember back in 2012, I visited Facebook's headquarters and I talked to somebody there. And again, I came from the oil and gas business. I said, how long does it take from something to become a concept to the moment that it is seen by customers? And coming from oil and gas, I expected, our timeline was about 18 months. In software, it was 20 minutes. Somebody would throw something out there, and it just kind of shows you how you can iterate. Biotech is even more complex than oil and gas. 18 months would be a super fast timeline for biotech. Y'all are spending years and years, like you said, going through tens of thousands of permutations before you finally find something, and then you want to try to improve the probability of success, like you said, right? And when companies do this, they're going to market the heck out of it, right? You're going to commercialize everything you can to get your return on your investment for something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I really like that example because I wish that in biotech you can fail fast. And unfortunately, that's not the case. If you fail fast, okay, this doesn't work, let's move on. And waiting 6, 7, 8 years before, a trial fails, that's devastating. And the stock is devastated, and reasonably so. So when we're investing in biotech, a lot of the times we're really counting on, okay, what's the DNA for the management team? Are they credible? Where are the brains at? So where are the scientists coming from? And so sometimes you hear about certain companies poaching scientists from different companies because that's one way to de-risk. Because with science, you just have to wait. You have to wait and see.
It's really interesting. I do want to share something here, Manisha, that we talked about a year ago, just to talk about how this industry is funded, right? When we are looking at biotech companies. Oh, maybe I can't share the screen. Sorry about that. Window. There we go. We'll save this. Apologies for the delay there. But this is something we shared back at 7investing last year, talking about why it's been such a tough go for biotech in recent years. This is in relation to Viva Systems. This is not necessarily a biotech company. They're more doing the systems to make things more efficient out there. But you can see right there in 2023, a couple of years ago, was one of the most difficult years for drug developers, right? All of the things you just mentioned. Especially capital that is required for a small company that doesn't necessarily have a very strong balance sheet. That's a high hurdle for them to get over. And when you have interest rates that are going up, like the Fed increased interest rates 7 times in 2022, all of a sudden that early stage funding from venture capitalists, from private investors might not be available. And it makes it even harder. Something that's already very, very difficult, even harder, especially when you don't have the capital available. But there is a light at the end of this tunnel. There is a glass half full perspective we can take on that, which is that innovation marches forward and technology might be helping to cure a lot of these risks and a lot of these difficulties of the industry. At the foundation of this, we're basing this on science, right? Manisha, you said there's tens of thousands of combinations you can go, but these are still atoms and molecules that are going into drugs that are, going into therapeutics that are addressing other molecules that are within the human body. Once you understand a lot of that fundamental science, it seems like there's rules and there's correlations. You can connect the dots between a lot of these things and then maybe apply something like machine learning to get smarter about what's working and what's not working to ultimately improve your probability of success of a new drug you're developing. Do I have that sequence of events correctly? Is that basically kind of how this is going out there?
Yes, this is exactly how it's happening. And, I'll take it back to sequencing. So the first infrastructure that's so ubiquitous in biotech is sequencing. So, cost curves have fallen. Everyone's they're able to sequence. And now we have more data. We have more sequencing data. We understand, okay, at the DNA level, okay, where's the mistake in our DNA that's causing X disease, Y disease. So more data sets, and too much to actually go through, individually by hand to understand. So now, what a lot of people have been asking and have been waiting for is, when will AI come into biotech? And it's finally here. And what's really interesting is that before, AI was really just hype in biotech. They talked about, okay, so now we can do more automation, we can do we can figure out, we can design molecules, which is new, fairly new in the grand scheme of things. That's interesting. And conduct more assays and do optimization work. But it was still very hypey. So just about 2 years ago, I think JPM 2024, a lot of companies were like, oh, we're using AI, and they were rewarded for using AI because no one really understood, okay, well, where are we using AI and in what context? There wasn't much clarity. This year, what we saw was there's more interrogation. Okay, so you're using AI. Have you seen any R&D cuts? Are there any operational efficiencies? Have you compressed the time from going to preclinical stages to stage one? Have you seen compressed timelines of the number of targets you've identified to go forward with, or how quickly you're able to optimize? So these are all part of the drug discovery process. And so even a small operational efficiency compounds over time. So that's just so much more time that you're saving. And if we can reduce the drug development timeline, even say 20%, 10 years to 8 years, that's very meaningful. And in terms of how much you're spending each year for developing these drugs, and that's not even including probability of success.
Yeah.
So right now we're at a stage where it's very hard to say, is AI developing better drugs? I think that's a second order question to ask. I think first order is, can AI help compress timelines? Can AI drive operational efficiency? So I think it's more about cost savings before we can answer the question, can they develop better drugs? Because at the end of the day, one of the other things you'll realize, kind of where AI is being used right now, it's more for small molecules. So it's not really being used for cell and gene therapy, but it makes sense. It's being used for small molecules. It's able to generate new, identify targets, and then find a corresponding, generate a corresponding molecule to target that, and optimization. So the preclinical discovery process, I do appreciate that. I think a lot of biotech analysts and a lot of people don't appreciate the number of years and how much work it takes to actually find a single candidate to take into the clinic. So if you're able to optimize there and get to a lead candidate or an optimized candidate just at that level, you're already taking months, at least a year, 18 months off of the drug development timeline. And then the next thing, which is, I think we have to wait and see, is probability of success. Right now, we mentioned Recursion. There are, it's not just Recursion. There are a lot of biotech companies who are in the clinic with drug candidates that they identified in the preclinical stages. So it's too early to tell if these phase transitions are happening faster, if they're going from phase 1 to phase 2 faster, or they happen to have a safer drug profile. But that is the hope. The AI is able to kind of identify these drugs as being safer for humans, or they have a better kind of morphology data and how they interact, how cells interact, that they just have a better data set before going into the clinic.
Biotech is such a different type of investing than so many other types of sectors that we invest in out there. You're used to kind of looking at fundamentals, and you're going to give a certain multiple of sales or cash flows or things like this. Biotech, when you mention probability of success, is a completely different beast, because so much of this is pre-revenue. And if you're lucky enough to even get something FDA approved and commercialized out there, that's great. But the way that maybe we value a lot of those early stage assets that aren't generating revenues yet is like you just mentioned. Is this a 10% probability of success? Is this a 50% probability of success? And then ultimately, what do we think our share of the market is going to be if we do commercialize anything out there. So I think in terms of the investing takeaway for this, it would be if we can improve the probability of success, maybe by pushing something through the timeline faster, reducing our own fixed costs and our financial burden, or even improve the science or the technical side of this, you're improving the probability of success of an early stage asset, and then you're also improving the valuation of your firm, at least from an investing. But is that right, Manisha? Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And, I completely agree. So biotech, when you're investing, you're definitely not looking at the balance sheet.
Yeah.
You can look at cash burn. So, and that's what most investors do. It's okay. So now they're using, they have sequencing costs have come down. Okay,
Mhm.
now we're using, say, CRISPR therapy, or okay, no, now we have an AI infrastructure. Things are being automated. They've integrated, computer vision with, machine learning. It could be a number of things, but at the end, it's like, okay, so is their cash burn reducing? So it's looking at their cost discipline, because inevitably they will have to raise. In order to get a single drug out into the market, they have to raise. And then it's looking at the adoption of these drugs. So once you get to commercial viability, is it actually going to sell? So the neat thing about AI right now, focusing on small molecules, is that usually they're intended for first line therapy.
Mhm.
So something like cell and gene therapy, just because of its complexity, there's more risk associated with it. They're mostly approved for first, third line, second line. So it's okay, after these patients have failed, X, Y, and Z drugs, now we're going to use this CAR T drug. But with oral compounds, it's easier for it to be approved for, okay, so this person was diagnosed with X disease. Let's use this oral inhibitor. So presumably, you have kind of revenue a little bit faster than you would if for cell and gene therapy.
Manisha, I know that you went to school at Stanford and you've worked with venture capitalists out there in California. You've seen some of these really neat technologies in recent years, whether that's CAR T therapies, whether that's CRISPR, whatever it might be. They're really exciting from a technical perspective, but I know that they were pretty cost prohibitive, at least in the early years. They were very expensive, hundreds of thousands of dollars for treatments for these things. And it sounds like the cost of the technology might be coming down, but also, in addition to that, it seems like maybe as some of these other tools or these other aids, if we can call them that, AI, the infrastructure, whatever is to speed things up, is it fair to say that this is unlocking some new opportunities that might not have been economically feasible before, where it would make sense to use a really expensive therapy to go after something where the market is really large in the early years to get a proper ROI on something. But now we're able to go after some of those kind of maybe orphan diseases or those smaller markets that were not being addressed in the first wave of this.
Oh, absolutely. So, you know, I'll take a step away from just oral inhibitors and AI, but going to CAR T. So most of those, so even though they came at higher sticker prices, I think the first one approved was 675,000. The second approved CAR T was 373,000. Can't believe I still remember the exact price tags,
Very
but I
nice.
do.
Right off the top of your head. Amazing.
So those were the price tags, and they were for kind of, I wouldn't call them rare diseases by definition, but they were, not as widely studied,
Yeah.
and kind of there are less treatments available. So, and that makes sense too, because if you go after a disease where there's already approved drug, that's a higher bar that you have to meet before you can get FDA approval. Now, if the comparison is standard of care, which is nothing, it's easier to get approved. So return on your capital becomes much easier. So it makes more sense and a better business sense to go after those indications. Um, and kind of going back to your question a bit more. So with oral inhibitors, faster iterations, going after rare diseases or special or kind of diseases with lower TAM, uh, it does make more economic sense. And it's very heartening for patients. There might be, 1,000 patients, 2,000 patients in the world with those diseases. But now, AI and all these cost decline curves through sequencing, AI, and say, CRISPR, being able to conduct more R&D at a fraction of the time, that gives them hope, because now it makes it's more capital efficient to go through the drug process. And say, one of the promises for AI is, if you have if you your discovery engine is based on AI, the thinking is, well, it's not just, okay, what assets, what is the pipeline program they're going after, but what is the breadth of their pipeline? What are
Mm,
they actually going after as an entirety? So, conceivably, what I'd like to see is, okay, so now they have, 10 different types of indications that they're going after, everything from, oncology to, a gastrointestinal disorder. So, because AI makes that possible. And it is a bit of a cycle. So we do have to go back to sequencing because we need more data. So it's
mhm,
not like, large language models where you can kind of crawl the web and get information. Scientific data isn't just, available on the web. You actually have to do the experiments to figure out, okay, so now we have the data set. And that's what's really interesting about Recursion. They have the largest phenomic data set, so it's not just, okay, they're using AI, but they have the largest phenomic data set. So internally, and it's, that's also capital intensive. It's they're taking these they're taking these cells, human cells, and they're making millions of chemical perturbations, in these cells, and they're capturing it, and then they're using computer vision and machine learning to capture those pictures. So something that the human eye can't see, they're able to see patterns and different disease states. And basically what they're trying to do is, okay, so we have this disease, oh, it looks similar to, whatever this pattern is, and computationally derive, okay, so this might be, a good target to go after. Okay, now let's generate an associated molecule that can help, this disease state or this morphologic state into a healthy state.
mhm.
So, and their entire system is vertically integrated, so it's not just AI, because even that presents a risk. How do we know that AI understands science? So you have to tie it with wet labs, and that's what they're doing.
Let's look at that a little bit more in depth. Here's Recursion. This is the company you're talking about, Recursion Pharmaceuticals, RXRX. That's the stock of our focus here today. It sounds like you said you got a vertically integrated platform here. It looks like they're going after a couple different indications, whether that's a MEK inhibitor or these other things that are in the early stage pipeline. But Manisha, I do want to ask a little bit. Can you tell me more about that genomic data set that they have? Is this not just publicly facing NIH studies or academic studies that are out there? This is something that is truly patient genomic data that they're then connecting the dots using the machine learning of AI to develop more efficient drugs. Is that correct?
Yes. So they so these data sets, they are driving themselves internally. So
Oh
they
yeah, okay.
have genomic data, they have these human cells. So now internally they're making it visual, right? So with all these chemicals that they're bombarding these cells with, they're looking, okay, well, what, it's just a basic question. What happens when, this cell is exposed to this chemical, this molecule? It's just gathering all of that data and feeding it into their internal kind of closed loop learning. So over time, their AI is learning a bit more. So it's proprietary to them. So conceivably, I think this is their moat right now.
Yeah.
I think long term, one of the questions that I have is, how long will they keep this advantage? Once you have kind of large pharma, once they start, really focusing on AI, they can create their own data sets. But right now, Recursion is, the only public pure play with the largest data set. So, that's why this company is so interesting right now. I saw this morning that their market cap is 1.8 billion.
Yes.
Um, and so I did a quick analysis. I used kind of my previous models to be like, okay, where should their pipeline actually be valued at? Um, and it's interesting because, if I hadn't done that modeling exercise, I wouldn't be quite sure if, does this justify, a pre-revenue company? So not taking into account just AI, but, as a biotech company, a 1.8 market cap, I'm comparing that to the CRISPR companies when, they had a similar pipeline and they were, sub 500 million.
Hmm.
So based on that, if we take AI out, let's just say it doesn't offer any operational efficiencies, it doesn't compress timelines, just with their pipeline alone, you know, I would say their pipeline is, should be valued closer to 2.7 billion.
Mhm.
So
It's undervalued currently, you're thinking. Yep.
yes, it's undervalued. And I think a lot of people are completely discounting their AI platform just because AI is so ubiquitous. So they're like, okay, that's nothing new. But, I think, especially in biotech, everything is a bit different from
Mhm.
every other industry, right? So data sets in biotech matter, because science is hard, biology is hard. Even conducting the scientific experiments that they're doing, it takes time and it takes capital. So unless they're partnered with Recursion, I know a company can conceivably go in and kind of redo everything, but Recursion already has early mover advantage. But also, why do that when you can partner with Recursion? It's just easier, faster on their timelines, less capital constraint.
It looks like they do have some partners listed, like you said. Roche is there, Sanofi, Bayer. They've kind of got some partner programs. Merck also that they're working, with other large partners out there. It feels like Manisha in years past, and you were the one that was building the models for these, and kind of the decision trees and the probabilities of success. But it feels like if you're a large biotech company, not a large, if you're a big pharma company, you're going after the biggest fish out there. You're going after the biggest opportunities because those are the ones that are going to move the needles for you the most. It feels like now we might be able to have smaller companies going after smaller opportunities that are off the radar of big pharma out there. But then you can start improving the probability of success of a whole bunch of different indications built upon that same vertically integrated stack and get a pretty good valuation. I mean, $2.7 billion is not an insignificant amount of money for a small cap biotech company. But is that the right way to think about what to look for and how to value these kind of companies that are early stage biotechs?
Absolutely. And
Yep.
that's another thing that is not baked into the valuation, in my opinion, is all these partnerships, they're invaluable because they're partnered with these companies. That's more data. They're getting paid to amass even larger data sets that they can iterate upon. And for their internal pipeline programs, that's a better data set. That AI can, they can use AI and they just have more information. So kind of with each cycle loop, their infrastructure gets better and better and better, and it's such a diversified partnership list. It does make it hard to think about other competitors coming in now. And I think it's completely possible, but you'd have to hit the ground running to catch up to where Recursion is now. And the I think the bar is quite low. So let's just say, there's a 20%, increase in R&D efficiency, through, timeline compression. That's only 2 years. And, we've seen that CRISPR, I wouldn't necessarily call CRISPR an infrastructure. It's a tool that is used. That was able to cut development timelines. So an infrastructure like AI, I think, could very meaningfully cut timelines. And that's not baked into the valuation. So, it's really exciting. But I think, what we often see, biotech's already risky. A lot of people are very risk averse, just because it's complex. It's hard to understand kind of what's happening with, each data readout. And so they're completely discounting AI. And I think Recursion is being seen as, okay, this is a biotech company. And on top of that, they're using something new and AI is new. So I think there's a lot of fear that's being priced in.
Fantastic. Well, that's Recursion Pharmaceuticals, RXRX. One last question I have for you about that, Manisha. You know that we're a conviction-based research platform here at 7investing. We go everything from strong buy to strong sell. I want to ask you before we move on from Recursion, what's your conviction on Recursion right now? Is this a slamming your fists on the table? This is a screaming strong buy? Is this a cautious buy because there's a lot of risks? Is this a stay away from an investor perspective? Give me 2 seconds to tell me what you think about Recursion from an investing perspective.
So I'm very disciplined with my conviction. So I would have said strong buy based on everything we've been talking about. But the reason I'm not, and I'm saying a cautious buy, is because I'd like to dig a bit deeper,
Yep.
and not only just on Recursion, but also their competitors. There's In Silico Medicines. I know they claim that they have the closest to market AI drug. So before saying a strong buy, I'd like to know their competitors. But I think at these levels, it is a cautious buy. Personally speaking, I'd buy this stock at these levels.
Heather, I'm going to bring you in to see if you have any questions or we have any audience questions from Nisha about AI and healthcare and drug discovery, maybe about Recursion Pharmaceuticals. Anything that you want to ask, Heather, here's your chance.
Hi, this is such an interesting conversation. Thank you, Manisha. Um, one big question I have is, do you see this type of AI speeding up and hopefully creating a more inexpensive pipeline coming into larger pharmaceutical companies outside the biotech sphere? Is it already, or do you see that coming down the pipeline?
Yeah, I definitely see that coming down the pipeline. I think large pharmaceutical companies, they'd love to have everything in-house if possible. But one thing to keep in mind is large pharmaceutical companies move slowly. They have
Mhm.
too many decision gates. And I think, what we've seen traditionally in biotech is pharma likes to just divert their attention, just like, okay, we'll have biotech do, maybe their priority are in the first three pipeline programs that they have, that generates cash. But the more kind of smaller programs, they like to partner it out. And they do that because they create relationships with biotech. Ultimately, they like to acquire biotech companies. So, it's not out of the question that one day Recursion could be acquired, though I think my view on Recursion is that one day they're going to be, the next big pharma company, but as a big biotech, I should say. The next Celgene is the best example I can think of.
Perfect. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. And then we did have a note from our James Early.
Oh, yes. Okay. A note from James. Did we have a comment from him, or what was that one about, Heather?
We sure do. One moment. We'll get that going. Show on stream. I think he was just talking about earlier the difficulty of getting therapeutics approved. Besides rising interest rates in 2002, oh, come back. um, so yeah, I thought that was kind of an interesting thing he was trying to point out, that it was just so difficult to get things approved. But yeah, that was all the questions I had for today. I really appreciated this conversation, though. I thought it was very fascinating.
And we do have one more question that was submitted early, to consult Manisha's expertise on a tangential but not directly the same type of topic here. But somebody was asking if we could get an update on Grail. Grail, of course, spun out of Illumina, kind of similar in the use of AI. This was more for diagnosing early stage cancers that are fragmented and floating around in the bloodstream. Manisha, we have followed this space, you and I, for almost a decade, I feel like, from the early days of Illumina to then Grail. Now we've got companies like Guardant Health and Exact Sciences doing this. Tempest AI is kind of the newest one. Even Hims and Hers says that they want to have a direct-to-consumer test for a diagnostic out there. My goodness, what an evolution of this space, direct-to-consumer for genomics and diagnostics. You can take that any way you want to, but how do you feel about Grail and the other peer competitors out there?
Well, one, I'm happy that Grail is no longer part of Illumina. I think it makes them more lean and more flexible. I will say that story kind of they have to scramble and kind of reorient themselves again. Being separate entity back to being part of Illumina, and then being a separate entity again. But that being set aside, I think right now is a good time to market towards direct to consumer. I think when Grail first came to be, it was still a bit too early in the trajectory.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see what Grail has to do and what it has to offer. But now they just have more competitors.
Makes perfect sense. And just one last question before we get out of here, Manisha. Being that you are at the forefront of innovation in this space, we were talking about gene editing a couple of years ago. George Church called that a blunt axe. Now it seems like we're talking about base editing and maybe prime editing and all sorts of other editings going forward. But is there anything in this space you're really excited about right now? Any new technologies? We've talked about CRISPR and CAR-T in the past.
Yeah.
Anything that we should be maybe just keeping an eye on because you think it's kind of exciting going on in science right now?
I'm waiting for a company that starts using AI in a meaningful way in cell and gene therapy. That's something I think will be happening. I think it's inevitable. I'm just waiting for kind of when it happens on a large scale. Because right now with CAR T therapies, they're using CRISPR to help them with cell potency and all of these other things. But it's been hard to go into solid tumor indications. So being able, where if AI is able to use the data sets that has accumulated over the years with CAR T, or just T cell therapy in general, being used in cell and gene therapy, I think would be really meaningful. And I'm not aware of a company that is doing that yet, but I'm waiting for that to happen.
Fantastic. Well, once again, our guest today, Manisha Samy, a wearer of many hats in the biotech industry, whether that be a venture capitalist, a consultant, an investor, and an analyst. Manisha, it is a real pleasure. Thank you for being on the 7 Investing Live show this morning.
Thank you for having me, Simon. It's always a pleasure, talking with you. And so, again, thank you for having me on the show.
For everyone that's been watching, I hope you've enjoyed your coffee on our Friday the 13th pre-Valentine's Day special, all about investing in innovation in biotechnology. Once again, Recursion Pharmaceuticals, ticker on that is RXRX. Stay tuned, because on Monday, coming up on the next show, we're going to have John Rotanti. We're going to be shifting gears from innovation in biotechnology to some value investing ideas, doing some deep fundamental research. Excited to have John on the show here on Monday. In the meantime, I hope you have a wonderful Valentine's Day. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you again on Monday.